What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle alongside Eagle sports editor Robert Sesta, and it's that time of the week to look at the other side of the field and what A&M will face in this big matchup against Alabama Saturday at Kyle Field at 2:30. And we have Nick Kelly from the Tuscaloosa News here to help us look at that Crimson Tide side. Nick, how are you? How's the week going? And are you ready for some mid-70s temperatures?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm ready for it. Bring it on. I mean, hey, if it gets to 60s, I'm okay with that too. I mean, I'm ready to start wearing my fall clothing. So that's where I'm at. But good to be with you guys.
For sure. Let's start out with this the same way we start all of these. What are some of the biggest headlines for the Crimson Tide heading into the game this weekend?
Yeah, I think the biggest headline is Jalen Milroe is playing pretty well, and the offensive line is playing pretty well because, especially on that second front, it's not been great from the offensive line for Alabama this season. But finally, there's reason for encouragement, I think, from the offense, from the offensive line. Just a lot of positions that have been suspect early on are starting to play better, which maybe it was the case if they need some time. But overall, I think there was some serious concern early on about the offense, especially. The defense struggled against Texas, but, I mean, Texas is a good team. They've got a great offense. And so that's not surprising considering it was the second game of the season. But the defense is rounding into form, but the offense is starting to get better too. But the question is, will that translate against a better team in A&M and also on the road against that better team? So I'm very curious to see how this team responds and how it does this week.
And for those who might have followed Alabama closely, kind of take a step back and pull back the curtain on the saga that has been Jaden Milroe and the Crimson Tide quarterback situation early in the season and then leading into this week.
Yeah, well, in truth, I think fans are realizing how spoiled they've been at quarterback for the past however many seasons with Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. I mean, that's a ridiculous lineup of quarterbacks that they've had over that span. And most schools don't have that kind of run. And that's eventually it was going to end, so to speak. And not that Jalen's a bad quarterback. It's just that he's maybe not quite that level at some of these guys they've had who have been Heisman winners like Bryce or Heisman finalists like some others. So I think there's been a little bit back to reality of that, hey, your quarterback is not guaranteed to be a future NFL starter, essentially. But Jalen has a lot of stuff that there's to like there. So anyways, they went into the competition. They went into the offseason in a competition, I should say, with Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson. They brought Tyler Buckner in from Notre Dame, and they were mainly competing. They also had freshman Dylan Lonergan, who kind of surprised as someone who's like, oh, this guy's looking pretty good. I don't know that he's ever seriously got in the thick of the competition, but he did enough to where he's slowly but surely, walked into that conversation at least. Jalen started at the front of the pack, though, just because he was the senior most member of the position, and he never really lost that position. And so he went into the season, the starter against Middle Tennessee, played really well, had 5. Against Texas, he had a few turnovers. And so then against South Florida, they started Tyler Buckner. It was a disaster, frankly. And just they couldn't get anything going. The offense was flat. They put in Ty Simpson. It was either late first half or early second half in that game against South Florida. Alabama won, but they only put up, I think, 17 points against the South Florida team that they should have put up way more points against. So then they go back to Jalen. Saban names him the starter, and Jalen started in the Ole Miss game, and then he started in the Mississippi State game, and now he's expected to be the starter in this game, and so he's their guy, and so it's been a little rocky at times. But Jalen, A&M fans, I'm sure will remember this game last season where he had, I think, 3 turnovers in the first half of that game, which is not how you want to start. And that was his first start of his career. He's filling in for Bryce Young. He's come a long way since then. Is he a finished product? Definitely not, but he's come a long way since that game. And we'll see how far away he's come. He didn't have any turnovers against Mississippi State. That was big. We'll see if he can do that against Texas A&M.
A couple of things is, on our side over here, we all thought Weigman was going to be the quarterback, and he was. Sometimes I think the beat writers know a little bit more than the coaches, not that Nick Saban ever makes any mistakes. But was the beat writers surprised when Milroe got benched for that second game, or did you guys have him as a starter even with the bad opening game?
Yeah, we weren't surprised necessarily. Me personally, I would have given him a little bit longer of a leash But kind of the operating theory to an extent is Saban wanted to see what his other guys could do, and South Florida is a good chance to do that. And so they had a chance to see what Ty Simpson could do. They had a chance to see what Tyler Buckner could do. Tyler Buckner especially showed that he's not the answer. Ty Simpson, maybe with some more time, could be more of the answer, but still the offense didn't have near the juice that it did with Jalen Milroe. And so I think that proved that to Saban, proved it to the teammates. And so that when Saban decided to name Milroe the guy, he basically can say to his players, look, you've seen them all. And not that he's saying this directly, but by his actions, he's saying, look, you've seen them all. Jalen's the guy you should probably get behind. Not that they weren't behind him before, but I think that if there was any question, that was answered after South Florida. So it wasn't terribly surprising. Again, maybe if it was purely based on how well he played or didn't play, like I still would have probably kept him in. But the sense I've gotten is that Saban wanted to see the other guys play. That was a good game to do it. They didn't go super well, and so Jalen's the guy.
Nick, you brought up a good point about the fact is, when A&M has played Alabama, they've had Heisman Trophy type players in the backfield, out at wide receivers. They've had Outland Trophy winner types in the line. They don't seem to have those. So who are the playmakers, and how does Alabama win on offense?
That's a great question, and frankly, I'm not sure, considering A&M's defense, you guys know better than me, but from afar, it seems really solid, really good. I don't know if running or passing is better against them, considering they seem to defend both well based on what I saw statistically. But this game, if Alabama's got weapons, they're going to have to step up. If not, it could be a long game for Alabama. I mean, because to your point, they don't have those elite playmakers like they have had at times. And that's not even necessarily a knock on what they have. It's just that, again, they've had such ridiculous talent at receiver, for example, that anything less seems like you have this big downgrade. Like, they've got solid weapons. It's just not, they don't have a receiving backfield that's a receiving group that is Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, all at one time. Like that was ridiculous. And, probably won't be having that anytime soon again. But Jermaine Burton is probably one of the top guys to watch for. Georgia transfer. Had a solid year last year, but still wasn't too consistent. He came on later in the year. This year, he's been Milroe's pretty much top deep threat. He's not a Jamison Williams, just pure ridiculous electric speed type, but he's got enough speed where he can take the top off the defense. He does well at locating the ball. So Jalen likes to find him on deep passes. Isaiah Bond's a fast guy at receiver who has made some plays. Malik Benson was the top JUCO transfer at receiver. He's solid. He hasn't been a big playmaker, but he's seen probably the most snaps along with those guys. But the guy to watch for is probably Amari Niblack. I've been advocating for Tommy Rees, the OC, to get him the ball more, and he has. And not because I've advocated for it, but I think he's been smart to do that because Amari Niblack is a mismatch at tight end. And good things happen when he gets the football. So he's got to watch that. I think Alabama has targeted more recently and would be wise to against A&M. So that's what I'm watching for in terms of those groups. Running back, they've got some solid runners in like Jason McClellan, Roydell Williams. They'll run you over. I mean, there's some tough runners. Home run speed is there to an extent with Jace. Roydell is more of that grinded out kind of bowling ball type guy. And so that's kind of what to expect from the running backs. And the offensive line, as you said, they don't quite have the across the way maybe dominance like they've had at some points, but they do have two guys, J.C. Latham and Tyler Booker, that, man, if you get in their way, if you don't mind your P's and Q's and get good leverage, they'll put you on your butt. I mean, they play a nasty style of football, especially Tyler Booker. He's the left guard, and that dude will move some guys. So they've got some movers. The biggest thing for them is their pass protection, trying to make sure that's solid because they have a true freshman left tackle in Caden Proctor, one of the highest rated recruits in the country, but he's still 18. He's a true freshman. And so there's been an acclimation period. He's gotten better, but still has some areas where he needs to get better. So that's kind of the offensive outlook for you. And I'm very curious to see if this Alabama offense can compete with the Texas A&M defense.
Yeah, you mentioned it right there going into my next question, and that's the matchup that intrigues me the most in this is A&M's pass rush, which has recorded 14 sacks in the last two games against Alabama's pass blocking, which has allowed a lot of sacks in the last couple of games. What has kind of been the reasoning why teams have been able to get so much pressure on Milroe and bring him down so far early in the season?
That's a great question. And if I had the answer, I might be doing something else. To me, it really, there's a lot of factors to it. One, it's just getting a group to gel together. Two, you got a true freshman left tackle who there's an acclimation period. Even though I think Caden Proctor is going to be a great player long term, he's 18 years old, and even just getting your body in physical shape to play college football takes some time. But also some of the rushers they've sent, like the blitzing has been creative by some defensive coordinators, so that they're matching up a safety or a cornerback blitzing against this big left tackle. That's not going to go well no matter how good you are, even if you're Andrew Whitworth or some great left tackle out there. And so that doesn't help. So some of it's been scheming that needs to improve. Some of it's been on Jalen Milroe in terms of making sure that he gets rid of the ball. He doesn't wait too long, because it also the pressures. He has to help set the protection, and so that's a learning process for the quarterback as well. So that's been a little bit of an error at times. Sometimes the running backs or fullback, he's more of a tight end, but Robbie Oots, he gave up a sack last week. And so it's been just a combination of different things and different issues. It's not purely the 5 offensive linemen have always struggled. They could use more help in different ways. And so it's a work in progress, and what exactly is the source of it, I don't know. But those are some of the things that it stood out to me as some issues that they need to correct.
What about, let's go to the other side, Nick, defense, because in 2015, I remember a hype top 10 game here. Alabama came in as only a 3-point favorite. They returned like 3 interceptions of Kyle Allen for a touchdown, and they won the game really on defense because Alabama's defense was so good. How is that defense? Can this defense come in? Can this defense win a game like that?
I think so. To me, I'm much more optimistic about this defense than the offense right now. And there's reason for optimism about the offense, but I think the defense is what's going to be what wins this team most games they're in. Because defensively, they've got some dudes. On the edge, they've got Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell, who lead the SEC in pressures right now for any duo, according to Pro Football Focus. Dallas Turner, he's got numbers right now that aren't far off of what Will Anderson had in 2021. And actually, Dallas Turner's numbers are in some ways better than Will Anderson was a year ago. So you've got 2 guys there as kind of the cornerstones of the defense. You've also got some linebackers who can fly around. Deontay Lawson is one of their best players, and he's a little banged up right now with an ankle injury. Not sure if he'll play or not, but you've got Jahad Campbell, who came in and played really well. He had an interception against Mississippi State. We got Trez Marshall, the former Georgia inside linebacker, and he's a veteran there. The secondary, though, might be, to me, the strength of that group, because you've got 2 safeties who played well. Caleb Downs is a true freshman, and he does not play like it. He just won Freshman of the Week this past week. He's had a few mistakes here and there, but overall he's been really solid. But at cornerback, they've got Khalil McKinstry and Terrion Arnold, which A&M fans will probably remember Terrion Arnold because Jimbo went after him quite a bit last year. He was also the cornerback on that last play that decided the game. Those 2 are very experienced, very talented cornerbacks who have fared well this year. And Terrion's taken the next step. Kool-Aid was great last year. Kool-Aid's been really solid this year too. But Terrion's improving as well because guys like Jimbo, Lane Kiffin went after him throughout last season. And so he's used to being targeted. So they've got a really solid secondary. Malachi Moore, who's their 5th defensive back, so to speak, but he's not really, because he might be their best defensive back, but they love using him in that star position to move him around. So there's a good chance you might see him lined up against an Anais Smith in the slot kind of thing. So a lot to like about the secondary. Last week they had a defensive touchdown off a pick 6 from Chris Braswell, so they can score. They're forcing turnovers. They're getting interceptions. Last 2 years, really, they weren't necessarily forcing turnovers to the extent that they maybe have in past years. More so last year was the worst year. But this year they're getting back to, okay, we're playing disruptive football, forcing turnovers. So this defense, I think, can keep Alabama in this game, but the offense is going to have to do its part. It can't just rely on the defense.
Well, let's end it with this. I know you've mentioned it pieces throughout, but what do you think are some of the most important keys for Alabama to be successful this weekend at Kyle Field?
Well, they got to protect Jalen Milroe. Starts there. If you can't do that, it's going to be a long night. But I also think that it's making sure that you get after Max Johnson and making sure that he can't be comfortable, because that's going to go a long way in disrupting what A&M wants to do offensively. So it's protecting against the pass rush and it's getting pass rush are the two biggest things. That might sound obvious, but I think in this game, that's where it's going to be won in a lot of ways, because you got talented guys on both sides of the ball for both teams. And really, Alabama can't find itself too far behind because you're playing on the road in an intense environment. And if you find yourself behind, this offense has big playability, but not to the extent that maybe it did 2 seasons ago with James Williams and John Mechie and Bryce Young throwing the football to them. So you've got to stay in the game. You've got to do your best to quiet that crowd noise and not make mistakes. So that's the biggest thing that Nick Saban talks about is you got to play winning football, which, well, duh, you're not trying to play losing football, but just he means that in the sense of you have to do things that don't lose you games, like getting dumb penalties, or they've had snap issues at times from the center to Jalen Milroe in the shotgun. So it's not having bad snaps. It's not making mental mistakes. And so Alabama can't afford those mistakes because this team is not, I would say, talented enough offensively to have a bunch of mistakes and stay in games. So those are some of the biggest keys to me, and I think it's going to be a really tough test. I think this might be Alabama's toughest game the rest of the way up until the postseason that is on the schedule, because it's on the road and against a solid Texas A&M team.
And that reminds me, if I could ask one more thing, Nick, obviously Alabama always gets the best shot. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking, since A&M won 2 years ago and came close last year around the community, do you feel A&M's gone up the food chain a little bit and who Alabama wants to beat or not?
I think yes and no. I mean, obviously A&M is not an Auburn or a LSU in terms of just or Tennessee, frankly, for just an old traditional rival, so to speak. But whether it's the fireworks last season between Jimbo and Saban, or if it's even this week what Anaya Smith said yesterday. I mean, there's plenty of fuel there, and you add in the fact that A&M's played them close the last 2 games. I mean, beat them 2 games ago. So I think, but there just aren't a ton of guys still from that team. I mean, so it's not necessarily a revenge game, but I think there is enough animosity between the two that this isn't just another SEC game.
Sure. Nick, before we let you go, where can people find your work and you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, or X, I should be calling it, @_ Nick Kelly. And check out our work at the TuscaloosaNews.com, myself and Chase Goodbread and others, just all kinds of content. So, just appreciate you guys having me.
For sure. Nick, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. If y'all are watching this on theeagle.com, thanks for giving us a watch. Or if you're listening on the My Aggie Nation podcast, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again next week.